So I'm here this afternoon with Levine, one of the prominent participants and advisory board members of the Hypoxia Symposium. And I think I'm going to start, Ben and I have known each other for a long time, but he knew Charlie Houston, the founder of the Hypoxia meetings, for a long time too. And do you have your first memory of the first meeting you came to and interacted with Charlie?
You know, I do. And Charlie, of course, was one of my heroes, I think, as he has been of many of us in this field. And I remember he was so intimidating as a character, and sitting up there on the podium and controlling the meeting in typical Charlie way. And what I remember is just sort of hungering for that opportunity to introduce myself to him, to get him to know who I was, that might be meaningful to me. And I still remember one lunchtime where I really wanted to go out and ski, but I saw Charlie, walking down the corridor, and I said, Dr. Houston, my name is Ben Levine, I'm from Dallas, Texas. I worked for the Himalayan Rescue Association, and Herb Hultgren was my mentor at Stanford. Could we just talk for a few minutes? And he was so gracious and so charming, and very sort of avuncular. He wanted to help, and he was, pleased that I was so enthusiastic, and I think that really characterizes, for me, what first drew me to the Hypoxia meetings, and why I've continued to come since. I think I decided the first one was 1989, and it's the best meeting that I ever come to, and part of it is that diversity of expertise and experience. You meet your heroes, the people who have defined the field, who have discovered acute mountain sickness and high-altitude pulmonary edema, and lead the way in thinking about mountain medicine and hypoxia medicine, from HIF1 alpha to alveolar lavage on the top of the Denali and the Margarita. So I think it really is quite special in that way. Part of it is, we have this spectacular setting, and the meeting is designed to provide those opportunities for people to interact. We have, we eat together, we have coffee breaks together, we have evening performance evening sessions together, and it's an opportunity for people to get together in a less than formal setting. I go to the American Heart Association meetings and ACC and the American College of Sports Medicine, and they're great meetings, and they're sort of the cornerstone scientific meetings for me. But this is the one where I go to really feel and participate in the fellowship of science.
It's a great way to put it. There are two things that you said that I think are really legacies of Charlie's. He had, I don't know where this passion of his came from about students and trainees, but it was deep. He almost cared more about that than the professors.
I think he did, and again, I have to say his accomplishments were so intimidating. I remember when he gave that talk, one of the evening talks about the 1936, 38 expedition, and I think everybody was sitting there watching those original black and white films. You could feel your pulse and sweat on your brow, and he wasn't just an extraordinary climber expedition leader, but he pioneered the whole concept of acute mountain sickness and what that means to climbers. And I read every single one of those books, at the Hypoxia books, from cover to cover, trying to extract what I could from the information from this meeting and from Charlie.
The other thing, in some subtle way, was this concept of collaboration and kind of meeting. It's one of the most satisfying bits of feedback I get for running the meeting, is hearing about people that are doing science. What they're doing today is because of a conversation they had here at the previous meeting.
And it opens up those opportunities. I've had plenty of postdocs. Justin Lawley came to work in my lab in part because conversations we had at a hypoxia meeting. And I'll tell you one other story. It's not a Charlie story, it's a John Sutton story. But I have to say it absolutely changed my career. I mean, I remember absolutely, we came up with this live high, train low concept. And for those who don't know about that, it's a way of doing altitude training where you live at altitude to acquire the advantages of acclimatization, but athletes will then train at a lower altitude so they can train hard. And we presented the evolution of that here at this meeting. And every damn time, John Sutton and Jack Reeves would say, I don't believe that. They were so skeptical. And so each time John would come around to a poster and, he'd press me on it. I said, well, John, what do I need to do to prove it to you? One of the most important things was he said, I'm not going to believe it until you have a concurrent control group that goes to sea level. It's the same thing at sea level. And it changed, how we organized the study. I said, I have to prove this to John Sutton. Mm-hmm. And so we created, we extended the study. We had a whole group of athletes who went to the brand new Olympic Training Center in Chula Vista, California. And I think it's one of the factors that makes it such an important study. Right. And but without being pushed hard by people whose respect I so craved, I'm not sure that we would have done that. I think that for me, I'm both a clinician and a scientist, and there are, if you go to some of the big meetings, for example, at the American Heart, the basic science is in one section of this massive convention center, and then the EP, electrophysiology, is in one section, and the prevention is another. And for someone like me who's fairly eclectic and diverse in my interests, it's almost impossible. I want to hear about the basic science. I want to hear about atrial fibrillation. I want to hear about coronary disease prevention. But the people don't talk to each other. There's no overlap. And what is, I think, so special and has always been special about this meeting is that it actually practices what it preaches. That is, we really do bring in people at the very basic level and at an entirely clinical level, and we make them talk to each other. It's not just, you give your presentation and go home. You give your presentation and you sit at dinner. And for some of the basic scientists, they had no idea what acute mouth sickness is. And some of the mountain docs, I'd never heard of HIF1 alpha. And I think that kind of cross-disciplinary fertilization is what makes all of us better researchers and better doctors.
I have to say, I think that's another legacy of Charlie's, because he obviously hasn't been around for a while, but he was around for the advent of molecular biology, and he insisted that if they couldn't give a talk that was interpretable by a general, smart medical audience, they couldn't give a talk.
Right. And when we were trying to figure out, as part of the program committee, you would always say to us, look, it doesn't matter how smart the person is, right, or how many papers they publish. The key is finding someone who can communicate to a diverse audience of smart people, very smart people, who may not be familiar with your language. And I think we've done an amazing job at that. I mean, obviously sometimes it fails, but there are so many of those special presentations and lectures which, I come away from this meeting just revved up with different ideas about what am I going to do next, and I'm not at the end of my career, but I'm pretty far in, and nevertheless, every time I come back from this meeting, I've got 10 different ideas of things that I want to do, or I want a student to do, or how we're going to collaborate. I mean, Ashim Sadek presented here at this meeting 2 years ago, and we're trying to reproduce that in humans at the German Space Agency. That's a good example of that kind of cross-fertilization.
And Gad Asher and the jet lag thing. Yeah. Okay.
So,
Thank you very much.